difficulties throughout, please contact GoToWebinar support at 1-800-263-6317. Presenting today from Keema, we have Emmy Frioni, who is the Business Development Manager. Emmy specializes in helping companies use technology to improve their supply chains. With over 5 years of experience in the industry, she has conducted numerous seminars and webinars globally and has a passion for assisting companies build, monitor, and manage sustainable supply chains. The 3 core learning objectives that we'll cover today include why it's important to map your supply chain, practical advice on the different ways that businesses can go about the practice of using audit programs, and smart technology to track and visualize your supply chain. And with that, Emily, please begin.
Good afternoon, and thank you for taking time out of your day to join this presentation. To begin with, some of you may think that mapping your supply chain may seem a difficult task, or it may not be relevant to your industry. However, according to a study conducted by McKinsey, the labor-intensive nature of the apparel and footwear supply chain, as well as its geographic footprint, makes it particularly exposed to disruption. Just taking the example of the current pandemic, or maybe others that might occur in the future, apparel and footwear manufacturing are susceptible to shutdowns because of unpredictable drops in consumer demand. Furthermore, a large share of apparel exports comes from Bangladesh and Vietnam, which are subject to heat stress and flooding. The industry as a whole is also exposed to workplace risks, a painful reality brought home by the 2013 Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh, which killed more than 1,100 garment factory workers and injured thousands more. This tragic disaster spurred the industry toward more active supply chain management and transparency about working conditions, especially. But of course, more can be done. So let's see what are the benefits of mapping your supply chain, how you can address some of these issues, and especially how technology can help you make this task a lot easier. Just to give you some background on Keema as a company, so Keema was founded in 2005 in Hong Kong. The objective of our founder was to create a company that is fast and flexible, while using technology and business intelligence. Today, we are present in 85 countries. We have auditors and inspectors almost everywhere in the world. Most of our clients are in the consumer goods industry, but we do work as well with retailers and other industries. To start with, what does it mean to map your supply chain? Supply chain mapping is the process of engaging with direct suppliers to discover indirect suppliers, resulting in an understanding of the end-to-end supply chain for a material, a product, or a brand. Supply chain mapping will be the first step to start a corporate social responsibility program, to gain visibility and transparency in your supply chain, to build a resilient supply chain, protect your brand image, or comply with modern slavery legislations around the world. First, start mapping your supply chain will help you gain visibility and transparency within your supply chain. In fact, only 6 to 10% of the companies can say that they have full visibility of their supply. The reality is that most companies today do not know their suppliers. Some of them may have started the program, but they do not know their suppliers beyond tier 1. It is in fact very difficult for a lot of companies to go beyond tier 1. There are different reasons. It can be that they have a very big supply chain and they do not know where to start. It can be that their tier 1 suppliers do not want to share information about the tier 2, the tier 3, etc. Or it can be that engaging the tier 1 suppliers, it takes a long time, and companies have not started yet engaging the tier 2 suppliers in their program. One of the issues that come up the most is that a lot of companies do not use technology to map their supply chain. They are overwhelmed with Excel files that save or not their progress. and make the whole process tiring and frustrating. We will quickly see later how technology can help you map your supply chain and make the whole process faster and easier for you. So gain visibility and transparency will help you understand who are your suppliers, where your products are made, and it will help you with disruptions you may face in your supply chain. As we have seen recently, especially last year, this year, the supply chain has had a lot of disruption. Trade wars between US and China, Brexit, climate change, weather disasters, rising costs, data security. And the latest one we have seen is the COVID-19 pandemic. During this time, most of the companies did not know which suppliers were affected, which factories were closed, what happened to their product, where the products were made, if they were going to receive their orders. It was a very difficult situation. A study from Harvard University has shown that the companies that had the foresight to map their networks before this crisis emerged had much better visibility into what is really going on with their supply chains. So instead of scrambling at the last minute, they had a lot of information at their fingertips. They knew exactly which suppliers, sites, parts, and products were at risk, which allowed them to put themselves first in line to secure inventory elsewhere. We have seen as well last year and this year that a lot of companies started sourcing more in other countries. So going outside China and going to Vietnam, Bangladesh, or India. Another benefit of mapping your supply chain is that you can protect your brand and as well your customer's brand if you are a supplier. So nowadays, it's very easy for a brand to take a hit from a scandal happening at their supplier's factory. With new technology, anyone, a journalist, somebody at the factory, can take pictures of children, for example, working at the factory, and then publish an article on social media saying that this supplier, the supplier of this brand, is using children at the factory. Your name will end up in the press. Bad publicity, your brand will take a hit and your sales will suffer. Even worse, your customer name may end up in the same article saying that this big company or this other big company is using suppliers that use children at the factory. This will result in you losing your clients losing their customers. It is very hard to come back from bad publicity, especially if it includes child labor, like the example I took. What we have seen in the industry, more and more companies have started mapping their supply chain, especially to monitor for this. So if you are a supplier and if you think that mapping your supply chain may not be relevant for you, it may be relevant for your customer. And they will be asking you, if they have not already, to start doing so in the next future. Okay, let's speak about subcontracting. So subcontracting may be your tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers. So if you're mapping your supply chain, you may know about all of them. But a lot of companies do not know that the suppliers are using subcontractors for part of the production, for example. There is a very big issue in your industry, in the apparel and footwear industry, about unauthorized subcontracting. For my past work experience working for SEDEX and now here at Keema, speaking with apparel and footwear companies, a lot of them have admitted that they have found unauthorized subcontracting and that it is very hard to fight it. Unauthorized subcontracting most of the time hides child labor, modern slavery, or awful working conditions for the workers. So mapping your supply chain will help you fight unauthorized subcontracting, as you will know better who your suppliers are, where your product is made, where the raw materials are bought, for example. We will see later how we can fight subcontracting with technology and other innovative solutions, as well as mapping the supply chain. One of the examples of not knowing where your products come from, one of the latest scandals we have seen come out is the forced labor camps found in the Xinjiang region in China. So this happened, the media investigated the issue, and it was spoken about it everywhere in the press. Some Western brands took a hit because of the scandal. Consumers, especially millennials like myself, are very careful where they buy their clothes from. And they would not buy clothes from a brand that is using a supplier that is using forced labor. So I'm sure that a lot of brands did not know that their cotton was bought in Xinjiang or of the working conditions of the people there. So after the scandal, a lot of companies started finding new suppliers outside that area. But if the companies had mapped the supply chain, if they knew what was happening there, for sure they would have changed their suppliers. They would have gone elsewhere before. Mapping your supply chain is as well the first step to comply with legislations in different countries regarding modern slavery. In fact, knowing better your suppliers and the risks in your supply chain, it will help you run reports on forced or child labor, and you will be able to report on modern slavery for different legislations. Let's take some examples. We have the Modern Slavery Act in the UK that passed in 2015. So all UK companies with a turnover of more than £36 million are required to publish an annual statement confirming the steps taken to ensure that slavery and human trafficking are not taking place in the business or in their supply chain. So if you have a company in the UK or a branch of your company in the UK that is making more than £36 million, you will be affected by this legislation. Then we have the due diligence in France, adopted in France in February 2017. Central to this law of vigilance is the obligation for companies of more than 5,000 employees in France or 10,000 in France or abroad to establish, implement, and publish a vigilance plan covering its own activities and those of its suppliers. Then, of course, here in the US, we have the California Supply Chain Transparency Act that became effective in January 2012. And requires companies to disclose their efforts to eradicate slavery and human trafficking from their direct supply chain. Canada, Australia have passed similar laws, and the EU will be passing, hopefully during this summer, a similar law requiring companies to disclose their efforts on fighting human trafficking, forced and child labor in their supply chain. So mapping your supply chain, it will be the first step to comply with this kind of legislations. Okay, so let's see a little bit how we can start mapping your supply chain. So these are the different steps most companies follow to map their supply chain. Of course, the steps may change according to your needs, to your program, and to your objective. So first of all, we have gather your suppliers' data, including addresses of the factories or other sites of employment. Start with direct suppliers, your tier 1, then go down the chain to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. Create a self-assessment questionnaire. Do a pre-screening of your suppliers based on the inherent risk. The inherent risk is based on the country, product, site of employment, function. Communicate with your suppliers and your internal teams on why you are doing this project and how it will be organized. Ask the suppliers to complete the self-assessment questionnaire. Start a supplier engagement program for the suppliers that were not responsive. risk assessment of the sites, considering the answers of the questionnaire and the inherent risk, and then you can start mitigating risks and start an audit program. Let's see these steps one by one, a little bit more in depth. Okay, so gather data. This is the first step, and it is a very important one. Most of the companies do not know where their suppliers are based. They may know about their tier 1 suppliers, but not for the rest of their suppliers. So this is a very important step, and companies need to make sure that their tier 1 suppliers are giving them the right information. The data that is gathered will include the supplier's company name, site of employment addresses, including the country, the region, the street, what products or a product or service is made at that site, a contact person responsible for the site. Again, we have to start first with the tier 1 and then go down the chain. It will be a lot easier for you to monitor your supply chain if you go from tier 1 to tier 2 and then tier 3, tier 4, instead of trying to do everything at once. Once we have gathered this data, and if you have a very big supply chain, so if your supply chain is very big, first of all, we will do a pre-screening of the suppliers. So the pre-screening, it will take into account only the inherent risk based on the country, product, and site of employment function. This is important because after you do this, you can create a list with the potential high-risk suppliers and start with them, start your program with them. Just to give you an example, for example, a supplier in China who is producing chemicals at the manufacturing site, he will come up as a high-risk supplier on the pre-screening step. Communication is always important. Communicate with your internal teams and your suppliers on why you are doing this program. What is the objective? How it will be organized? Who is going to be involved? You can use different means of communication. Webinars, emails, in-person meetings if needed. But the communication step is very important. So you need to be careful with this one and make sure that everybody understands the objective of the program. After the pre-screening, we will create a list of high-risk suppliers. And you can start sending them a self-assessment questionnaire. Usually the self-assessment questionnaires are based on human rights, labor standards, health and safety, environment, waste management, etc. The objective of the questionnaire is to have more accurate information on where the factory is, what is happening at the factory, how the workers are being treated, if the supplier has any system in place to track their environmental impact, for example. Of course, I gave an example on how we can do a self-assessment questionnaire, on which topics, but this should be tailored to your code of conduct and should be mostly tailored to your code of conduct and make sure that you are addressing your objective there. In my experience in the industry, a lot of suppliers will unfortunately not answer the questionnaire or understand the project or understand why they need to give information about their suppliers. For that reason, if you can, it is recommended to start a supplier engagement program to help your suppliers better understand why you are doing this program and ask them to complete the questionnaire. So usually supplier engagement programs will include a lot of communication, phone calls, for example, training, webinars. It is always best to do the supplier engagement program internally with the people that are already in contact with your suppliers. However, if you don't have capacity, you can always go outside and hire companies like Keema or others that can help you to engage your suppliers. Okay, so now we have the inherent risk. We have the answers of the self-assessment questionnaire. However, again, if you have a very big supply chain, it can be too many suppliers to start with. So for that reason, we are going to perform further analysis. So we are taking the inherent risk and the answers of the questionnaire, and we are running another risk assessment. After the risk assessment is done, we will do a list of suppliers that are high risk, medium risk, and low risk. This will help you to organize your program. So we will start the program with the high risk suppliers, then medium risk suppliers, and at the end with the low risk suppliers. So once we categorize the suppliers, we will start an audit management program. The program will get information on the suppliers and check if they have given you the right information during the self-assessment questionnaire. So we will send there an auditor who will do an audit and see how the supplier is treating the workers, how is the situation at the factory. However, here at Keema, during an audit, we do not only check the factory or interview the workers, we do as well take the GPS coordinates of your supplier's factory. And this will help you verify that the address that the supplier has given you is the right one. It will help you with your mapping process, and it will tell you if your supplier is using subcontracting, for example, that maybe you haven't authorized or maybe who has not signed your code of conduct. Suppliers that haven't signed your code of conduct. So again, we will start with high-risk suppliers, then go down to medium-risk suppliers, and at the end, work with the low-risk suppliers. Once the audit is done, the auditor will put in place a corrective action plan. These are recommendations from the auditor on what to put in place to close the non-compliances that have been found at the factory. The corrective action plan will help your suppliers improve their practices at the factory. In my opinion, one of the main benefits of mapping your supply chain and starting a corporate social responsibility program is to build continuous improvement in your supply chain. So make sure to take advantage of findings during the self-assessment questionnaire or the audit. Implement strategies for the future. Another aspect is the training. So it's great to start a training with your suppliers and tell them how they can improve their practices. You can do this now with the technology through e-learning or in-person workshops. To build continuous improvement in your supply chain, you will need as well to put in place beyond audit solutions and make sure that the workers are being treated well there, for example. So these are some type of audit you can use for your program. We have, here at Keema, we perform several. We have our own Keema ethical audit, which is based on the SA8000. The most used and accepted audits by the industry are SMETA and BSCI. So SMETA is a methodology created by SEDEX and is based on the Ethical Trading Initiative Code and the International Labour Organization. We have the BSCI methodology, which was created by Amfori and is based on the International Labour Organization and national regulations. And then you have some other industry standards that are there that, of course, you can use as well. One type of audit that our clients, especially in the apparel and footwear industry, love is structural audits. So this audit will help with suppliers that are in danger from a safety side. So for a structural audit, we will send an auditor that is an engineer to make sure that the building is safe and that it's not going to collapse, like we saw before happening in Bangladesh with the Rana Plaza in 2013. So this is an audit that is really interesting, and it has started to be very used in the apparel and footwear industry. Okay, so we saw a little bit how to start mapping your supply chain. Of course, if you have questions, you can always ask us questions for the end of the webinar, or if you would like to discuss anything in particular, you can contact me directly after the webinar. But now let's see a little bit how technology can help. So all of the steps we have seen can be complicated. They can take time and effort. But unfortunately, only 25% of businesses use technology to map their supply chain. Everybody else is using paper or Excel files, which for me is a pity because technology would make their life a lot easier. There are many ways that you can incorporate technology to map your supply chain. Let me tell you a few examples on how we use technology here at Keema. So to start mapping your supply chain, instead of using Excel files, you can gather the data on a platform. Once the data is gathered, we will do the pre-screening of the suppliers with the technology and the risk assessment with the technology. So it's a lot easier to put together a list of suppliers where you can start from. Then we have the GPS coordinates. As I mentioned before, where Keema goes to do an audit or an inspection, we will take the GPS coordinates of your supplier and make sure that they're not using subcontracting, for example. Then we have our Keema platform, where you will have a dashboard with insights and KPIs in a single place, and you can manage your audit program through the platform. This is very convenient as well because you can schedule audits from everywhere with the app or with a computer. Another thing, when I mentioned that training is important, training your suppliers is important. If you need, here at Keema, we have the e-learning academy that we can put at your that you can use to train your suppliers directly. We have a lot of lessons there on CSR, on how to improve the practices at the factory, etc., etc. And also, Keema has launched a new platform that is called Keema One. Keema One is a software as a service platform where you will be able to map your supply chain, manage your audit program, and visualize on a map where your suppliers are located and how they are connected to each other, helping you gain visibility and transparency in your supply chain. If you are interested to know more about our new platform, please contact me after the webinar. Okay, so technology will help you map your supply chain. You will be able to optimize resources, reduce costs, and save time to focus on high-risk suppliers, for example. Drive improvement. Empower your suppliers and factories with actionable insights, e-learning content, and collaborative tools to improve quality and compliance. Boost efficiency. Quicker way to monitor your suppliers and see which ones are performing well or which ones are putting in place the corrective action plan and closing their non-compliances. And one of the most important things is achieve transparency. So get a view of where your product is being made and the supplier performance at every tier of your supply chain. And of course, it will help you save money as well. Okay, So during this presentation, I presented some benefits of mapping your supply chain. But if you go deeper in the analysis of your supply chain, you will be able to find others. So just an example, like an interesting example, is that mapping your supply chain, putting in place the corporate social responsibility program, gaining visibility and transparency will help you as well work towards some of your sustainable development goals. So that one can be another benefit of start mapping your supply chain. Ask yourself these questions. Do you know where the manufacturing facilities of your suppliers and their suppliers are physically located? Which parts are manufactured at each location? Do you track the history and frequency of disruptions that occur at each facility and geographic region due to other natural forces, hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, or other factors? Labor strikes, power outage, quality issues, the pandemic we saw, for example. If your answer is no to most of these questions, then it's only a matter of time before you get blindsided by a supply chain issue or a disruption. This is why it's important to start mapping your supply chain. In long term, supply chain mapping can lead you to greater efficiencies, cost savings, and safer products. And most importantly, it will help you face future disruptions in your supply chain. So please feel free to ask questions.
Thank you, Emmy. We'll go ahead and take some questions now. So as a reminder, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box in your GoToWebinar panel. We'll get to as many questions as we have time for, and if we run out of time, we'll follow up via email with any unanswered questions. Emmy, so of course, a lot of what you're talked about in your presentation today hinges on a good relationship with your supplier, being able to obtain information from your agent or direct supplier. But what if you face any sort of hesitation or barriers to getting that information to gain visibility into your supply chain?
So I can answer to this question for two different topics. So if we're speaking about getting information from your tier 1 suppliers, and your tier 1 suppliers are refusing to give you information about your tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers. So this happens a lot, unfortunately, in the industry. A lot of tier 1 suppliers prefer not to give information because they are scared that the brands or the companies will work directly with the supplier and not go through them anymore. So the thing that I can advise if this happens is to maybe have a contract with your tier 1 supplier saying that you are not going to use the tier 2 or the tier 3 supplier for that product by yourself. Like you're always going to pass through them to use that supplier for that product. Then if we're speaking about the tier 1 supplier not wanting to give any information about their factories, for example, I would advise you to change tier 1 supplier, because it means that they may hide things from you, and they may things that may lead to a scandal, for example, and it will really affect your brand.
Great, thank you. So following up on that question and this idea of working with upstream suppliers especially, can you talk about a full supply chain audit program? Do you suggest that companies have some form of full audit program into upstream tier 2, 3, 4 suppliers, or are there other tools that can complement using a full audit program with tier 1 suppliers to gain some visibility and access to those suppliers farther back in the supply chain?
Sure. So it's a very interesting question. Yeah, what is mostly done in the industry, most of the companies do, they do audit all of their tiers. So they start with their tier 1 suppliers first, but then they go down the chain and they start auditing tier 2, tier 3. I mean, you can even trust your tier 1 suppliers that they are giving you the right information, but even your tier 1 suppliers may not know what is happening at the factory for the tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers. So it's really, the audit is really important to verify the working conditions of the workers at the factory. And it should be done at any tier of the supply chain.
Okay, thank you. On the subject of technology in the supply chain, can you give some perspective and your thoughts on using blockchain to verify information that your suppliers communicate to you?
I mean, yeah, you can always try to use blockchain. The best example, I would say, of the technology is to use a platform where you are able to run risk assessments all the time. The problem is that a lot of things may change at the factory. For example, during the pandemic, if the factory has a COVID outbreak, they will close, or maybe some workers will not go back, they will hire other workers. If the management of the factory change, the working conditions of the workers may change. So it's really important to monitor what's happening at the factories. Have a platform that you can use, I would say daily or every week, and then see what is going on. And we usually advise companies to do an audit every year, because same thing, everything can change at the factory in 1 year. A trade war can start, an earthquake can happen, factory management can change, the owner of the factory can change. So yeah, managing the supply chain through technology will help you keep an eye on your suppliers, even on the suppliers that you trust, because you never know. And make sure that they are giving you the right information, that they are putting in place the corrective action plans to improve their factories.
Great, thank you. So I think this next question is kind of from the perspective of companies who are smaller or maybe don't have as much influence or leverage with their factories. How do you navigate getting suppliers past that communication stage, or if there's an issue there, but there may not be the leverage of a strategic customer to get that information, especially if this is a case of a potentially high-risk supplier?
Of course. Yeah, thank you for the question. So yeah, I mean, we do have here at Keema, and when I was working for Sedex2, they had a very small companies that were as well starting to map their supply chain, or that had started a little bit mapping the supply chain. So you are in the apparel and footwear industry, which means your supplier, most of the suppliers, they have already been asked to have an audit, or they already know about this kind of practices, because the audit in this industry is very known, and most companies maybe have already started having a CSR program. So you can have this conversation with the supplier and say, I have started this program, explain to them why you have started the program, tell them, I have my own customer who is asking me to start this program. If I lose my customer, I will not be able to buy goods from you anymore. So you can convince the suppliers to accept an audit. If they really insist that they will not do it and they will not want to work with you on that, you can always try to send an unannounced audit and see if if the auditor can find something at the factory. But yeah, I would say it's difficult, because if they don't accept an audit, then most of the time it means they're hiding something. Again, in this industry, suppliers already know about this audits. They already know about customers asking for transparency, visibility. So if they're refusing, it means that they're hiding something. and I would decide not to work with them anymore, or send an unannounced auditor and see what happens, what they will find. There are other solutions as well. For example, you can send an auditor for what we call here at Keema a neighborhood audit. So instead of going at the factory and asking questions to the workers at work at that factory, we can maybe go and see the factories around that one and speak with other workers or people that work at the other factories and see if that factory, for example, is employing children, if they have any issues there, if they had any problems, and get some feedback like that as well.
Right, makes sense. Thank you. So then the question of licensee relationships has come into the chat here. Can you talk about what the dynamic of bringing in that sort of relationship entails? Does this business model work well if a company is licensing out their brand rather than working directly with suppliers to produce their products? Certainly that adds a level of complexity. Do you have any sort of thoughts on that type of relationship?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I would treat a licensee like a trading company. Like when you work with a trading company, it's the same issue. You don't know which suppliers they're using or what's happening. So I would say if you have a licensee, you can ask them to start their own program and see if you can have access to the reports of the audit, or if they can give you some information on how they're doing the program, what are the results. So yeah, I would advise that. Some companies do that with their trading company, with their tier 1 suppliers that are trading agents and that are intermediaries as well. So yeah, I would say you can try that with your licensees, or you can treat them as a supplier and just ask them to start sending you reports, giving you access to information from their tier 2, tier 3, or other suppliers they're using.
Right, great, thank you. Do you have, so now getting into some specific questions in terms of using materials that the brand or retailer working with the supplier has specified. If a brand has very specific inputs that they're hoping their supplier or mandate that their supplier use in the products, how would the company go about ensuring that those inputs are actually being used? For example, a company might ask their supplier to use a specific insulation material and give a brand name and specifications. How do they know that that component is actually being used in the final product? Do you have maybe sort of standard operating procedure or best practices from companies to gather that level of information?
So in that case, you can maybe do like what we call a beyond audit solution. So if you've asked the factories to start working to start using a specific product or a specific machine to help them with, for example, with sustainability or with the environmental side of the sustainability, what it can be done, it's a beyond audit solution, like doing a factory improvement service, for example. So we would send a team at the factory and to see what the supplier has been doing, if they close the non-compliances, if we do an audit. I mean, we need to do an audit before to assess the factory, and then we will send this we will do a factory improvement service where our team will see what the supplier has done, if they have implemented the corrective action plan, if they're using what the client has asked them, for example, and if they're doing everything correctly. This can be an idea, but then it will depend on how it was implemented and if they're doing it, like if you trust your suppliers as well. And I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, communication and collaboration is very important. So always try to have communication with your supplier and have a good relationship to make sure that they follow your code of conduct and they do what you ask them in this case.
Right, makes sense. Thank you. In relation to some of the statistics you provided in your presentation, can you specify if those are for apparel and footwear only? For example, they mentioned that the statistic that you mentioned that only 25% of companies use a technology solution for supply chain mapping. Do you have a sense of who that, what industry and who the respondents were to create that value?
Okay, yeah, it's a very good question. Actually, in my presentation, that was percentage that is general for all industries included. It was not specific to the apparel and footwear industry. And I don't know the percentage for the apparel and footwear industry. However, just because the apparel and footwear industry is an industry that has already started doing corporate social responsibility from what we saw from 2013 with Rana Plaza, I would say that a lot of companies use already technology to map their supply chain, to monitor their audits, their audit programs. If the person who asked the question can contact me later, I can give him some names on who is using this with Keema, who are some of our clients in the apparel and footwear industry that are using technology with Keema to monitor their supply chain. The other thing is that we have a platform that is free. So the only thing the clients pay is the service, so the audit, for example, or a beyond audit solution. So if you think that technology can help you, please feel free to contact me. I can show you how the platform works and how you can monitor your audit program in there. And I can give you some names of companies that are doing it with us.
Okay, great, thank you. In your supply chain audit program, is there an ability for companies to calculate sort of what if or hypothetical analysis if they were just make changes in the facility to improve their audit? Is that an ability in your models?
Can you please repeat this question? I don't think I got everything.
I guess it's just asking about the flexibility of the supply chain audit structure. Does the supply chain audit also provide a model that can do what if analysis?
Okay, got it. So I would say that part, what if, it will be done at the analysis of the pre-screening. So with the inherent risk. With the inherent risk that is based on the country, the product, the site of employment, and the product, we will run a risk assessment to see if that supplier can come up as high risk. However, it will not really be very accurate because you can have a chemical company in China that is a manufacturing site. And this company may come up as high risk in the screening process, but for example, if you send them an SAQ, a self-assessment questionnaire, and if you send an audit, they may be a very good factory to work with, for example. So an audit is mostly to verify if the information you have from the supplier is correct and if the supplier is doing everything correctly. Because we will send there a person, an auditor in person to do the audit and to check everything. So it will be more like findings that he will find at the factory.
Right. Okay. Thank you. In terms of risk assessment, and specifically in the Xinjiang province, did Keema do ethical audits in that area to verify slavery or forced labor in the cotton industry specifically, or what does Keema's work in that province look like presently?
We do ethical audits everywhere in China normally. I haven't heard of any suppliers in that province that has not agreed to have an audit, at least with us. But I would need to know maybe the location of the supplier, and I will have to check with our audit team to see if there are any issues right now. But as far as I know, we haven't heard any supplier refusing audits in that province.
Okay, great. Thank you. In terms of getting started with supply chain mapping, should a company wait for their client to ask to start that process, or how do companies typically embark on a journey like that to map their supply chain?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Thank you. So a lot of companies wait for their customer to tell them, hey, can you start mapping your supply chain? I need to have information about your suppliers. Especially like big companies, they will always ask that question. However, I would advise companies to start mapping their supply chain by themselves without waiting for a client to ask them, because it takes some time to do this process. It's not done in 1 day or 2 days. So as sooner they start, better it is for them. They will be able to have all the information, and if a customer asks about what they're doing for sustainability, for CSR, and they have already that information, they have already started doing something, and they will already know about what's happening with their suppliers. Again, they will not only be protecting their own brand, they will be protecting their supplier's brand, their customer's brand, as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. It looks like we have covered all our questions today. So thank you again, Emmy, for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Have a great day. We'd like to thank everyone who joined the session today. And thank you again to Keema for sponsoring today's program. An email with links to the PDF and recording from today's program will be sent to all participants. So thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.